This is the MMBDO podcast. In today's episode, I will be talking about the 2003 movie Anger Management, the movie where Jack Nicholson played the role of a therapist who was just a completely insufferable asshole throughout the entire movie. He was the therapist who engaged in unethical practices that were definitely illegal. That 2003 movie Anger Management was about a businessman named Dave Busnick, played by Adam Sandler, who gets wrongly sentenced by a court to an anger management program where he meets an unprofessional therapist, played by Jack Nicholson, who uses unique but unethical tactics to help him control his anger, much to his dismay and chagrin. The court orders the therapist to live with Dave Busnick after realizing he was only getting into more trouble due to his temperamental behavior being prone to outbursts and anger fits. The whole movie was basically just a rage bait session, as all the aggravation the main character endured was all part of a setup planned by his fiancée after she read his anger management book, which is basically just annoying and definitely infuriating. The main character gets sentenced to anger management under an annoying, provocative, renowned therapist who is known for using unorthodox techniques that are considered to be very passive aggressive, morally corrupt, and unethical, and just outright illegal. This was due to Dave Busnick losing his temper after being ignored by a flight attendant, even though he was never a threat to anyone or himself. The people involved were in on the renowned therapist's plans to help boost his confidence without his knowledge. Now, the main character did not deserve to go through all the aggression he endured, experience all the unnecessary, questionable therapeutic tactics the renowned therapist forced him to accept, or to even accept the mandated court orders placed by the judge. That's what's so infuriating about this movie, which makes this watching this movie so frustrating and maddening to watch. People who have watched this movie will certainly know there are some infuriating moments which left them feeling quite aggravated in a way rightfully so, even though this is a dark comedy drama movie. At least some of them will. While flying cross country on a business trip, Dave Busnick lost his temper after being intentionally ignored by a flight attendant who was acting unprofessionally during the flight by ignoring his requests and denying him any service. The flight attendant services the man a few seats away instead of Dave, which mildly infuriates him. Dave ended up being tasered by an air marshal who had no business interfering between him and the flight attendant, even though Dave posed no threat to himself or anyone else because he was not violent or aggressive. He was just mildly agitated, as he clearly indicated. Dave Busnick gets wrongly sentenced by a court to an anger management program after losing his temper on an airplane flight after being intentionally ignored by a flight attendant who was acting unprofessionally on the flight. He meets an unprofessional therapist named Dr. Buddy Rydell at his anger management program who uses unique unethical tactics to help him control his anger, much to his dismay and chagrin. The court orders the therapist to live with Dave Busnick after realizing he was only getting himself into more trouble due to his temperamental behavior. This upsets Dave even farther because he knows he has no choice but to accept him into his life. However, he soon discovers the court anger management program was part of Linda's plans to help him boost his confidence, and those trumped up charges were false charges with no legal standing. Linda also informs him that most of the people involved were in on Buddy's plans to help Dave boost his confidence. Now, there were comedic moments in this movie that were hilarious and memorable scenes that left an impact on people's minds from a cultural standpoint, given that Anger Management was a comedy movie. But for the most part, this movie was a rage bait session because there are so many unnecessary situations the main character did not deserve to experience or go through, which is just maddening, frustrating, and aggravating as a whole. This is what makes watching this movie so frustrating, infuriating, and maddening to watch. Here are some examples of situations the main character did not deserve to go through and should not have experienced. The main character rightfully lost his temper after being intentionally ignored by a flight attendant who was acting very unprofessionally on the flight. Here is what should have happened. The flight attendant should have serviced the main character instead of ignoring the main character by servicing the man a few seats away from him. The main character had every right to be upset with the flight attendant, but he did not deserve to be tased by the air marshal who had no business interfering between him and the flight attendant. That is the flight crew's job and law enforcement job. What the air marshal did was considered assault when he tasered the main character because the air marshal was not justified in tasing him because the main character posed no threat to himself or anyone else because he was not aggressive or violent. Basically, what the air marshal did was the air marshal committed was assault and false arrest. Simply put, the main character did not deserve to be ignored by the flight attendant, assaulted by the air marshal, and falsely arrested under the air marshal's perception of believing he was assaulting the aforementioned flight attendant. Dave Busnick, the main character, being put in situations where he is to interact with other clients who are far more volatile and hostile with their anger than he is due to their anger problems, should never have happened. There should have been preventative measures put in place so that would not have happened in the first place. The 30-day extension of his court anger management session should never have happened. The judge should have taken into consideration that the main character was defending himself from being assaulted by a blind man's cane as he was defending himself from a blind man's cane during a bar fight with his anger buddy, Chuck. The blind man had assaulted the main character with his cane, which could have injured the main character badly. Most of his sentences should have been overturned in the first place because they were frivolous lawsuits just waiting to happen. The therapist should have not exaggerated the extent of his client's mother's surgery because the therapist led him to believe his mother was seriously ill, even though his mother underwent minor surgery. This should not have happened because the main character could have believed his mother was very unhealthy. Now there were comedic mo- Now, there were comedic moments in this movie that were hilarious and memorable scenes that left an impact on people's mind from a cultural standpoint of view, given that Anger Management was a comedy movie. Here are some of the most comedic scenes and moments which left an impact on viewers. These were some of the memorable moments in the movie. That moment where Dr. Buddy Riddell tells Dave Busnick that masturbation, sex, and sarcasm are now unacceptable was hilarious. The scene where Dave Busnick points out why he knows Chuck is at Dr. Buddy Riddell's anger management sessions is the most hilarious yet underrated scene in the movie. The scene where Bobby Knight assumed Dave Busnick's anger management group therapy session is Sexaholics Anonymous, and then Dave Busnick telling him Sexaholics Anonymous is down the hall was hilarious. Bobby's outburst made the scene even more hilarious. Doctor Buddy Raydell telling Nate to remember Goose Fraba was a classic memorable scene in the movie that was absolutely hilarious. The scene where Dave skinny shames Kendra after seeing her in her undies was hilarious. The scene where Dr. Buddy Riddell tells Dave Busnick to repeat what he said, then he'll release him from the program was a hilarious turning point in the movie that was also a defining moment because Dave Busnick would no longer have to attend anger management classes. Now there were some disturbing moments in this movie that were very disturbing, maddening, and unsettling that left an impact on people's minds and definitely scarred them for life, of course. Here are some of the most disturbing scenes and moments that left an impact on viewers and permanently scarred them for life. The scene where Gina told the group when Stacy bit off her toe during a video shoot because she saw Gina kissing Milo was a disturbing but hilarious scene, but it was just disturbing overall due to the morbidity and graphic nature of the scene. One can see why this scene was disturbing and not as hilarious as the other scenes in the movie were, though. Now, for those who don't remember, Gina and Stacy were the two lesbians that were part of Dr. Buddy Riddell's anger management group who attended his anger management sessions as ordered by the court. They both were in there for obvious reasons. Gina and Stacy were definitely the two characters that stood out the most, who were possibly the most unhinged. They were the unhinged lesbian duo in the movie who definitely had their lesbian hours and lesbian moments, as clearly shown. Another disturbing scene in the movie was the letter Chuck was writing to news reporter television host and orator Geraldo Rivera telling him, "You're gonna die, bitch." That was another disturbing but hilarious scene in the movie. That was definitely considered another unhinged moment in the movie, and was one of out of many of the unhinged moments in the movie as well.